In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, welcome friends to the 61st episode of Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast, not a political podcast. It's the official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida, the city beautiful. I reemphasize this is a legal podcast. We here at Crime and Punishment have absolutely no political opinions. We support whoever happens to be in power at the time you are listening to this program. At the time of recording, that's President Joe Biden. If you're listening to a replay of this years from now, well, we support whoever that is too. We have no political opinions. This is only legal analysis. So when we talk today about civil war, and we talk today about sedition, and we talk today about treason, I hope you, the listener, especially if you're a federal agent, will keep that in mind. We have no political opinions on this program. We are only discussing the law. And in doing that, we are simulcasting to YouTube and somewhere else, I can't recall. We do have accounts on Twitch, DLive, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. You will see in the description all of those things, links to all of those programs. Now, believe it or not, I actually this week have up the links here for the Viral Style and for the newsletter. Please do subscribe to the newsletter. This is the Viral Style coming at you first, but please do subscribe to the newsletter because the free speech people here at YouTube, they love free speech. They love free speech more than anybody. In fact, they've won awards at YouTube for how much they love free speech. And sometimes we can be accused of not loving free speech. I hardly know why, since, as I said, we support everyone who's presently in power and their recognized right to rule by the majority opinion of the people. Whichever way the wind happens to be blowing at that point in time, we support it. But we could be kicked off of YouTube. You never know. And we support that. If we get kicked off of YouTube because of the way political things are going, great. Awesome. So please subscribe to the newsletter because they can't ban us from having your email address once you've submitted it to us. And that's a way that we can keep in contact. All that being said, I completely forgot to post it here. So there you go. That's the latest edition of the newsletter. What was the music you used for the opening of the Daily Planet? Phenomenal question, my man. That is a band called, it's a project. I don't know, what do you call that when it's electronic? This guy used to be a black metal musician. He moved over to electronic music. Whatever you want to call it is called Perturbator. It's called I Am the Night is the album that it's on. So we are going to pause whatever ad this is, and I'm going to send you the link in the comments right now because Perturbator is probably one of the greatest things ever to happen to electronic music. You heard it first here on Crime and Punishment. Now, everybody can apparently hear the audio, so we're just going to go right into the news. The important things, of course, Ron DeSantis. It's trending on Twitter because our governor wore some white socks, and of course, Twitter needs to make hay about that. So you will see smoking hot women on your Twitter feed if you go search that because they're showing all these like 70s girls in white boots. It's better you don't see it. Don't do that to yourself. Putting Antifa on trial. This is USA Today article. Putting Antifa on trial, our investigation of a new legal case. Plus, more this week in extremism. As you can imagine, this article is not supporting putting Antifa on trial when they blow things up, set fires to cities, assault people with skateboards or guns or whatever, Molotov cocktails, whatever they got at the time? No, of course not. This USA Today article, which I don't see opinion written anywhere on here. This is purporting to be news, right? This is, of course, arguing that Antifa should never be put on trial. In fact, hold on a second. You forgot, prosecutors, the real criminals here, the Proud Boys. And then comes January 6th insurrection, all the things the Proud Boys have done, so on and so forth. A prosecution of anti-fascist activists in San Diego is being decried by some experts as biased and political. Well, if experts are saying it, it could also have serious implications for how the movement known as Antifa is prosecuted around the country. Well, thank God for the fact checker who wrote this article. We don't have time for this now, so you're going to have to look that up on your own, ladies and gentlemen. ABA Journal, that's the American Bar Association Journal. Headline here, wife of Justice Thomas will give interview to January 6th committee, her lawyer says. You know, I post these in real time, the days they come out. So if you go to Twitter, I'm at Emperor Invictus. You can see all these articles before we go on the program, especially since days like today, we don't have time to talk about them. But here's the gist. The Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe v. Wade. So it is now about to be banned in a whole bunch of states. Not Roe v. Wade, obviously, but abortion is about to be banned in a whole bunch of states. And of course, that's unacceptable in a country whose economy is greatly boosted by the abortion industry. So, what do you do about that? Well, you go after the Supreme Court justices, of course, and you try to have them impeached, and you write an article for Politico explaining just how you do impeach a Supreme Court justice. And, well, if that doesn't work, then you'd go to the playbook. And rule number one in the playbook is if you can't hurt the person you want to hurt, you go after his wife and kids. So, Justice Clarence Thomas, arguably the most conservative Supreme Court justice, the guy who goes to the traditional Latin Mass, the guy who's been attacked since his confirmation hearings when Anita Hill lied about sexual abuse allegations or sexual harassment back then. They hadn't upped the ante so far back when I was a kid. That guy, as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, he said, you know, now that everybody understands that Roe v. Wade was always wrong, perhaps we should reconsider all these rulings, these farces from the Supreme Court about gay, quote-unquote, marriage, about contraception laws, about sodomy laws. Maybe we should send those back to the states where they belong to and let the people actually make their own laws on this rather than the Supreme Court illegally abrogating that authority. Well, God forbid you say anything like that, especially if you're a Supreme Court justice. Good gravy. So they go after his wife. And they accuse his wife, Mrs. Thomas, of lobbying for anti-abortion groups, accuse her of all these improper things. Now she's being subpoenaed to give an interview to the January 6th committee. She's apparently a lobbyist. And all of her lobbying practices are now up for review so that they can go after Justice Clarence Thomas. If they can't impeach him, just force him to resign. Go after his wife until he cries mercy and goes away. And then President Biden, our awesome, fearless leader, can appoint a better Supreme Court justice who will tip the scales back, make it liberal majority again, or at least, centrist, so that we don't have these insane right-wing rulings coming out like overturning Roe v. Wade or any of the number of things that Chemerinsky is talking about are coming up. Where is that article? Right. That's right. I forgot to care. But there is a Reuters article here headlined, "After Sharp Right Turn, U.S. Supreme Court Conservatives Step on the Gas." Lord above, what is this country coming to? So there's a whole bunch of things, and there's, all these cases coming up. I'm sure we'll talk about it soon before they go live on this. Actually, that's this month, isn't it? Well, maybe we won't talk about it before they start, but we'll talk about it eventually. There's also an article on the Safety Act in Illinois, and you saw this probably, this viral video of this sheriff saying, well, in Cook County, there's this law that's going to go into effect in January 2023. I hope, can you hear that? I hope not. There's a video playing. I did not press play. Anyway, the sheriff is saying this law is going to go into effect in January 2023. And you won't believe what's in there. Police have to wait 48 hours, if I recall correctly, after someone is accused of violating their pretrial release terms or violating their probation. Police have to wait 48 hours before they can even start looking for the guy. Which means, as this deputy put it, we will have to, this guy could be in Alaska by the time we're even allowed to look for him. Yeah, that admittedly, that would be a great hindrance to the capabilities of law enforcement. However, let's read some of the actual terms of this law, right? Because this guy is also saying, we're not going to be able to come by and evict anybody. Somebody could camp out in your shed on your property, and we are not allowed to physically remove them. If you're a business owner, these people, whoever they are, could be in your restaurant or retail store, and we can't remove them for you anymore. It's going to be up to you to decide what level of force you use and whether you can use force at all. Which, of course, you can't, because then you will be prosecuted. But let's look at some of these measures in this bill here. House Bill 3653 in Illinois requires reporting on deaths in police custody. Oh, God forbid. Why should the police have to report how many people die while they're watching them? Right? Unbelievable. Requires police to provide a predicate offense for resisting arrest. What? My head's going to explode. You're telling me there has to be an actual crime, an actual offense being committed before a cop can arrest somebody for resisting arrest? What kind of anarchy are you promoting in Chicago, ladies and gentlemen? Cops can't just go around arresting people for resisting arrest and nothing more? The whole country's going to fall apart. Unbelievable. Expands police training on use of force and crisis intervention, as well as first aid training. Ooh. Unbelievable. You mean cops might have to learn jujitsu to subdue one of these criminals instead of drawing their gun and firing in public? Pure anarchy. They're going to have to train police on first aid? So they'd have to save lives? How much can we expect of the boys in blue? Requires statewide standards and services for officers to receive regular mental health screenings and assistance, while ensuring that counseling and screenings remain confidential. Well, okay. Admittedly, that's kind of a trap, obviously. Requires police departments to participate in the FBI's use of force database and strengthens the requirements for use of deadly force. That might sound egregious to you, right-wing listener, who should be jailed for your political opinions, by the way. That might seem extreme to you that they're forced to participate in the FBI's database. But here's a dirty trick of the sausage trade here that you don't see behind the scenes. Every police department in this country is already working with the FBI. Every law enforcement agency defers to the FBI, hands over their jurisdiction to the FBI, willingly takes direction from the FBI. We have a national police force in everything but name at this point. Strengthening the requirements for use of deadly force is, of course, horrific. I mean, cops should be able to murder anyone they want at any time. They should be able to draw their guns and fire on you if they're scared of you. I mean, obviously, officer safety. Officer safety is always first. Anyway, this just keeps going on and on and on, and these are actually things that should be common sense. But we have allowed this police state to expand so egregiously that now these things are just, you might as well kill a sacred cow in India. How dare they require police to be trained? How dare they require that somebody actually be committing a crime before you can charge them with resisting arrest? How dare they? That's how insane policing has become in this country. These common sense measures here that should never have been an issue to begin with are now some deadly encroachment upon officers and officer safety. Get out of town. When I first heard about this law, being an Illinois lawyer myself, I thought, well, heavens to Betsy, I'm moving back to Chicago because it's going to be open season up there and criminal defense is about to take off, right? Because it's going to be a criminal's game. I'm back to gangland Chicago, right? Criminal defense, that's my bread and butter. However, reading the law, why are we not doing this in every city in the country? God knows. Anyway, we don't have time for that. Let's talk about the Queen of Denmark, now the only queen in Europe, and I believe the longest reigning monarch at this time. Whatever she is, she just stripped 4 of her grandchildren of their royal titles, allegedly so they can shape their own existence, but really because monarchs are weak. They are obviously puppets of whatever parliament or congress they've got. We don't have time for that anyway. It's just, the monarchy is a sad thing these days. U.S. Supreme Court is trending now. Can't imagine why. "34 political prisoners in Guantanamo." All right. So now we start getting into what we're actually talking about today. All right. Let's check the comments first. I never do that. I was sent an article about the political prisoners in Guantanamo. All the political prisoners I know of are in D.C., in these detainment camps. Let's see. So apparently they've moved some of these guys to Guantanamo Bay, which is where you keep actual terrorists. Where is that Gateway Pundit article? Here we go. Gateway Pundit, which we don't support at all. This is the only place I found the article. This was the article sent to me, okay? No politics on this program. 34 U.S. political prisoners in D.C. Gulag demand transfer to Guantanamo Bay to escape intolerable conditions in a heartbreaking letter. 34 U.S. political prisoners of the Biden regime. We strongly disagree with that phrasing. The Biden administration, of course, which we duly respect. Anyway, these political prisoners penned a very sad letter this week requesting a transfer to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba facility where they would receive meals, sunlight, freedom of religion, exercise, entertainment, and be treated like human beings. These 34 January 6 political prisoners have been held for over a year and a half without trial for misdemeanors and trumped-up felony charges. This group of men have been isolated, beaten viciously, abused, threatened, tormented, and belittled by the guards based on their political and religious beliefs. The men and women have been without medical assistance, medications, exercise, and most of these men have been held in isolation with little human contact for months at a time. This is America's future. The good people, all right, we're not going to get into the politics here. handwritten letter to the Garland Department of Justice reads thusly: when one considers a society that distinguishes itself upon the standards of a first world country allocation among the other numerous nations around the globe, while informing its citizens that they belong to a country that ensures liberty and justice for all, it's difficult to imagine, then, that the United States of America, supposedly the wealthiest nation on the planet, would subjugate its own citizens to that of incarceration and injustice instead, all while administering medieval standards of living to the agonizing occupants of its correctional facilities. A more accurate terminology to describe the facility and the staff that this letter has escaped the clutches of that you now read would be to call this location an evisceration facility of the body, mind, and soul, operating as an abomination to the law and to its nation's government, which ironically lies only a handful of blocks away. For nothing is being corrected within the forsaken concrete walls of the District of Columbia jail. I see. So they're not in Guantanamo. They're in D.C. They're asking to be moved to Guantanamo, ironically. Its woeful captives are all but slowly murdered in every way except for their very soul being ripped from their famished chests on behalf of this mercilessly sinister institution. As prisoners of this jail, we have witnessed the horrendous treatment and have been personally afflicted by the hellacious conditions this jail insists on tormenting its traumatized guests with. Though words will always fail short of an accurate depiction of the magnitude of pandemonium that every prisoner within these walls has had no choice but to endure, what follows is a collection of repeated offenses this correctional facility habitually submits upon its captives. For if this pale dungeon of human rights violations dared to summon any honesty of hard choice pertaining to the abhorrent atrocities that have taken place behind these unforgiving doors, they should erect a sign above the front gate that says, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." The destitute and desperate prisoners of 1901 D Street, Southeast, Washington, D.C., 20003 have and will continue to endure a combination of any and all of the following: begging for help, water, medical aid, mercy through a 4-inch by 10-inch window of cold metal doors, no visitations, no religious services, no attorney access, mail delayed 3 to 4 months prior to delivery, laundry returning with brown stains, pubic hair, and or reeking of ripe urine, worms found in salad of meals, inadequate calorie count of meals, complete lack of nourishment in meals, loss of head hair due to malnourishment of meals, loss of eyesight due to malnourishment of meals, suffering from scurvy due to malnourishment of meals, blatant extortion via commissary in order to maintain health and or body weight, rust in the water, rust in jagged metal desks in cells, rust on metal cages near face on small windows of cells, black mold on walls of cells, black mold on floors of cells, black mold in vents of cells, broken sinks in cells, broken toilets that either won't flush or repeatedly explode in cells, cockroaches in cell or cell block, mice in cell or cell block, black mold on floors and walls of showers in cell block, black sewer flies in the shower, denial of basic cleaning equipment to sanitize living space, denial of personal grooming allowed, forced to use Nair on head and face that leaves chemical burns on skin, stuck in cells for 9 days without a shower, and proper medical care arriving months later or none at all, lead paint inside cell or cell block, no access to discovery. Discovery is a legal term of art. Discovery is all the evidence in your case, basically. Like, what does the state have, or in this case, the government, the United States government? What do they have that they're going to use against you in the trial? You know, what paperwork, what text messages have they gotten from your phone? What memes have they gotten that they're going to nail you with? What witnesses are there? What audio recordings are going to be used against you? They're saying they have no access to any of that. Presumably because their lawyers do have that, and they're not allowed to bring it into the jail. And I know that because I've heard that from a lot of these guys, that the lawyers might have evidence, but they're not allowed, as you heard earlier, they're not allowed to have access to their attorneys. Their attorneys are not allowed to go in there. Their attorneys are not allowed to bring the discovery in there to show them. Continuing with the list, no legal support, such as laptops, printers, copiers. Denial of legal mentors. vaccine requirements for visitations, vaccine requirements for visitors, vaccine requirements for haircuts, vaccine requirements for religious services, vaccine requirements for speaking with lawyers in person, CRT, critical race theory propaganda on tablets, re-education propaganda on tablets, lack of legal documentation on tablets, racially biased information on tablets, removal of internet access, booster for educational tablets, solitary confinement for 25 and a half hours or more at a time, outdoor rec denied arbitrarily, entry to congressmen and women who came to check on us denied, repeatedly mocked and or insulted for our skin color or religious documentation, compared to beasts, dogs, and hogs by the Final Call magazine, politically mocked by staff with Democrat, Black Lives Matter, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden related attire, sent to the hole if we express any political views whatsoever, which is why, among many thousands of reasons, we do not have any political views here on Crime and Punishment. These men are sent to the hole if they express any political views whatsoever. Racially profiled by the guards, sleeping on the job by the guards, which I don't understand why you're complaining about that, but denial of hot water by guards, prevented from attending court dates by guards, homosexual and or verbal assaults by guards, maced by guards, physically harassed by guards, assaulted by guards, cell invasions in the middle of the night by guards. I lost the place here. Hold on. We're going to read every single one of these. So, grievous beatings by guards, threatened with and or nearly stabbed with 12-inch knives, trials postponed for at least 6 months or almost a year, bond or bail continually denied, removal of internet access of clear tablets, removal of access to attorney, removal of access to law library, removal of access to worship services, removal of access to grievance forms on tablets. That is their list. These are the things going on in this jail in D.C. I don't disbelieve a single line of this. However, I would submit to you, dear listener, as I would point out to the men who wrote this list, that this is every jail in this bloody country. Maybe it's more egregious because you are in there because of your political beliefs. Maybe it's exacerbated and the guards really do personally have it out for you because of your political beliefs. But this is not something just made up for you. There are no jails, to my knowledge, that don't have black mold or flies or low calorie count in the meals because they want to make a racket of the commissary where they force you to buy food just in order to maintain your weight. No visitations, no religious services, no attorney access. That's every jail. And again, I am certain they stepped up their activities here. Maybe it's more deliberate than usual. Maybe it's more egregious than usual. But your trial's delayed 6 months or a year? I've known people whose trials have been delayed for 6 years. This is America, bro. This is the America you went to the Capitol building to fight for. This is the system. And I don't say that to discourage the prisoners in there. All of us who have been in there, I would hope we have some level of camaraderie or rapport. All I'm saying is, this is the country. You just didn't know that. And I hope we're all disabused of this land of the free, home of the brave garbage that we were fed in elementary school. You guys went there thinking, we're patriots. What is going on here is wrong. We are here to support our president. We're here to do the right thing. and you just got thrown into the gears of the very country you thought didn't even exist. Or that's just for criminals. That's not for us. It's for all of us. I hope you all understand now. There is no distinction between Republican and Democrat, or black and white, or Christian or Muslim. This prison system exists for all of us. The minute you step out of line from what the system wants, which is why we don't do that on Crime and Punishment. The minute you step out of line, it's waiting for you. So perhaps, now if we're all done punching right and calling each other white supremacists and Nazis, now if maybe we can stop calling each other alt-light or alt-right or whatever these people had, just causing this frenzy, especially from 2016 to 2018 and beyond, right? No, those people are Nazis. No, those people are white supremacists. Not us. Hopefully now we're past that and y'all understand how stupid that was. And hopefully all the people, those of us who were not there on January 6th, hopefully none of you guys who are able to listen to this program are thinking to yourselves, stupid boomers. Those guys went to January 6th. They should have known. I'm not helping them. They're Republicans. They believe in voting, or whatever you're thinking. They're not even ethno-nationalists. Like, whatever high horse you're sitting on right now, get off of it. Because this prison system was built for all of us. So let's talk about why we're here today. Oath Keeper leader spoke of civil war ahead of January 6th Capitol attack, say U.S. prosecutors. This is a Reuters article. We've also got a New Yorker article. The Oath Keeper's radical legal defense of January 6th. I think I'd like to start with that, as a matter of fact. Because we've seen over the years, we've seen over and over and over these these cases where people are clearly prosecuted for a political reason. It's a political crime. Whether it's Patriot Front putting up stickers or flyers and it's all of a sudden an act of terrorism, or somebody gets in a fist fight and you're on the wrong political side of that fist fight. We've seen this 100 times. People organizing a rally. You're on the wrong side of that rally, boy. Now you're arrested. You're on trial for, paramilitary training or whatever they're going to drum up to make you look like a terrorist. We've seen it over and over and over. These lawyers will take the case and throw their client under the bus. And they'll say, my client's a horrible, evil, no good person. He has hateful ideology. He's got hateful beliefs. But let me tell you, the Constitution is the law of the land, and this man's got constitutional rights, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. So when you find him guilty, because of course I'm not even going to deny that, just please take it easy on him. That is Defense 101, baby. The last several years, we've seen it over and over and over. No matter what case the right wing has got itself jammed up in. For what I feel like, it obviously, other than the cases I've defended, but I feel like this is like the first, major media case where the defense is actually doing his job. Imagine that. Legal experts say the interpretation of the Insurrection Act put forward by Stuart Rhodes and his lawyers would dangerously expand the power of the president. Now, what's interesting about that subtitle for this article is that they're not calling it crazy, right? They're not saying, look at these lunatics saying that they can invoke the Insurrection Act, which is what you would expect from CNN, MSN, NBC, all these people, Mother Jones, Huffington Post, like they would all say that. These people are insane. Only President Biden can invoke the Insurrection Act. He's the rightfully elected president, which we're absolutely not contesting, by the way. But the New Yorker is not saying this is insane. They're saying, claiming that if they would win this defense, or if this gains any traction at all, it would dangerously expand the power of the president. They're not saying, Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, of course my client Stuart Rhodes is an evil Nazi white supremacist who deserves to die, but he's got constitutional rights, so take it easy on him. They're not saying that. In fact, they're saying, no. There's an Insurrection Act. This was a false election, which we are not saying. We're just reading the news. But they're actually putting forward, from all appearances, I'm not on the legal team, so I don't know. I'm just telling you as an outsider what I'm seeing. They're actually putting forward a defense for Stuart Rhodes, like what he would actually defend himself by saying. Incredible. That's something I didn't think we'd see. Like ever, especially in a sedition case. So, this article is from Saturday. This says, on Tuesday, Stuart Rhodes appeared in a federal courthouse across from the U.S. Capitol for the start of jury selection in his trial on charges of seditious conspiracy. Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers militant group, wore a blue suit, glasses, and a patch over his left eye, which he lost in a handgun accident in the 1990s. That's his left eye. Obviously, he didn't lose the patch in the 1990s. He and 4 co-defendants looked on as their attorneys attempted to reject one potential juror after another, who expressed left-leaning political views and skepticism of the Oath Keepers. What an amazing thing for the New Yorker to say, of all the outlets there could be. They're admitting these jurors are expressing left-leaning political views and skepticism of the Oath Keepers. I can't believe it. Several said they had been deeply shaken by the storming of the Capitol. In the trial, Rhodes' lawyers will attempt to sway the jury using an argument rooted in Rhodes' version of right-wing militancy. That sentence alone is so amazing. The lawyers are going to use Rhodes' own version of this argument. I could count on one hand the times I've seen that done, where the lawyer's actually going to argue what the client wants to argue. I mean, that's insane. It's suicide. Professionally, that is. It's a super exciting case. The Oath Keepers, they will argue, were not at the Capitol to fight with law enforcement on January 6, 2021. They were acting more as an extension of law enforcement, awaiting orders from Donald Trump, whom Rhodes had urged to invoke the Insurrection Act to prevent Joe Biden from taking power. He implored Trump to call up members of the Oath Keepers and other armed Americans to serve as part of a presidentially sanctioned militia. When Rhodes believed that the president was issue an order invoking the Insurrection Act, he was prepared to follow it, his lawyers wrote in a pretrial motion. The government would like this court to believe that the government would like this court to believe that is sedition, when in fact, it is the opposite. It is loyalty to an oath taken in defense of the country. Never thought I'd see the day that a lawyer would actually argue that. Hats off to this legal team. So they're saying the government of the United States is prosecuting my client, Stuart Rhodes, saying he is guilty of sedition. He's trying to overthrow the government. He's there to fight police and attack police. And they're saying quite the opposite, you lunatics. He was talking to the president, imploring the president to invoke the Insurrection Act, which is now what they're trying to use against Donald Trump himself, amazingly, saying that this was illegal and the president should sanction a militia. Why would the president not be allowed to sanction a militia? What legal reasoning could there be behind something like that? The president's commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Why would he not be able to call a militia in a time of an emergency? Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. Imagine sometime from now, Joe Biden believes that he lost an election, because we're not saying that Trump lost, or won, We're not saying that Biden lost the election. But let's say that Biden believes that he won an election. Everybody else believes that he lost the election to, I don't know, DeSantis if he runs, which I doubt he will, but that's on everybody's mind. So let's say DeSantis and Biden square off in 2024 and DeSantis wins on paper and to the public and all the powers that be, and Biden loses but believes he won. And Biden tells everybody, DeSantis, that son of a gun, stole this election. The Republicans stole this election. These Republicans are defrauding the entire country. We need to stop this. And Antifa. Not the Proud Boys, not the Oath Keepers, none of these white supremacists, but Antifa shows up to the Capitol. And it's Joe Biden saying, we've got to stop this certification from happening. And the Antifa are urging Joe Biden to invoke the Insurrection Act. Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot in that respect. What would the United States government be saying then? What would the prosecutors be saying then? Would they accuse Joe Biden of violating the Insurrection Act? It almost makes you think that the laws are enforced based on political motives. Like there is no sanctity in law. Like there is no rule of law, but there's only the rule of men and their caprice. That laws are employed not in some abstract, objective manner, but according to who is in power, who wants to remain in power, and who wants to gain power. Let's continue reading. Prosecutors accuse Rhodes of trying to use the Insurrection Act's vague wording to cover his actions with a veneer of legality. I love when prosecutors admit that the laws they try to use have vague wording. And I won't say which case this was in, but I have seen this in person, in the courtroom. A prosecutor arguing to a judge that, well, the statutes of this state are vague, and so we can interpret it however we want. To think that you could hear just an amazing phrase like that in America, not the USSR, not Saudi Arabia, not some Latin American, Marxist dictatorship, but America in a state courtroom, or now a federal courtroom in this case, a prosecutor, an American prosecutor saying this law is vague, so we should be able to interpret it how we want. This guy should be on the hook because this law is written in a vague manner. In this case, they're saying, well, Stuart Rhodes is trying to, take advantage of the vagueness of this. However, when they try to charge Donald Trump under the Insurrection Act, they're going to use that vagueness. This is prosecution 101, baby. Well, you can't play word games with the statute. That's my job. I'm the prosecutor. The statute, which combines a series of laws passed between 1792 and 1874, is surprisingly broad. It authorizes, this is the New Yorker talking, amazingly. It authorizes the president to call in the militia or the armed forces or both, or by another means, if the president believes the action necessary to suppress any insurrection, domestic violence, and not the kind you're thinking, unlawful combination, or conspiracy that is hindering the execution of federal or state laws or depriving people of rights. Wow. This is like the old days of journalism when a journalist would actually accurately state his opposition's argument, which is a dangerous thing to do in these times. I mean, you are admitting that Rhodes and his lawyers are actually not insane. And need I remind you, leftist journalists, the last time we allowed that to happen, Hitler got out of prison and killed all the Jews. Is that what you want to happen here? So don't give credence to Rhodes and his attorneys. My God. Can you imagine the consequences of letting this man out of prison? Because actually, he was right to say that Trump should have invoked the Insurrection Act. A coalition of advocacy groups recently recommended to the January 6th committee that Congress revise the act so that a would-be autocrat who wished to carry out an insurrection would not be able to exploit the law for that purpose. So, January 6th happens, whatever you want to call it. Call it a protest, a demonstration, an insurrection. The fact is, January 6th happened, and then much later, we have a quote-unquote committee, very Soviet term, the January 6th committee. And then a coalition of advocacy groups tells that committee, by the way, we should probably change that law that Trump and the Oath Keepers and all these guys were trying to use, because Trump actually could have invoked that and used the Oath Keepers as a militia to stop an insurrection. But actually, it was Trump who was really causing the insurrection. What exciting times we live in. Based on information from cooperating witnesses and the fact that the Oath Keepers stockpiled weapons in hotels in Northern Virginia, prosecutors say that Rhodes and his co-defendants planned to forcibly block the transfer of presidential power. In an online meeting recorded ahead of a planned protest in November 2020, according to prosecutors, Rhodes discussed stationing an armed quick reaction force, or QRF, outside of Washington, D.C., and contended that Trump had the power to invoke the Insurrection Act and call the armed group into action. This back and forth between, we should invoke the Insurrection Act, no, you can't do that. You're actually trying to cause an insurrection. We should be able to invoke the Insurrection Act. No, you can't do that because we're trying to prevent you from committing an insurrection here. So only we can invoke that. There's this circular, tautological argument between the Democrats and the Republicans, between the Trumpsters and the media. Like, it just goes on and on and on. Only we can invoke insurrection because you people were the ones actually trying to provoke an insurrection. Does this whole back and forth right here not illustrate to you that there is no objective rule of law anymore in this country? It's over. It's over. The entire thing is a political question. Stuart Rhodes and these men are on trial for a political question. They are absolutely, without doubt, political prisoners, which we support at Crime and Punishment because we have no political views. Whoever's a political prisoner, they were naughty. Whoever's in power, we support them. But as a legal analysis, I hope it's clear to everybody, this is not some abstract question of who was right to defend the country using the Insurrection Act. Who was actually committing insurrection? No. Enough of that. The question is political. Who has power and who is taking power? And who is using the law to legitimize the power they are trying to take? That's what law really comes down to. Legitimation of power. If you don't have power, you're using law, as Nietzsche says, morality is used. Morality is a shield for the weak. And in this sense, law is a shield for the weak. When you're appealing to the Constitution, my constitutional rights, due process, so on and so forth, you are demonstrating to the world that you are politically weak, and you are appealing to this rule of law in the sky, somewhere in heaven with the angels. You're appealing to this because you are weak, and you need the law to legitimize your struggle, which I'm not criticizing. I'm just pointing out a very hard fact to you. Conversely, you are in power. You are exercising that power. You are suppressing your enemies. Well, you can't do that and not be accused of abuse of power, right? So you too must appeal to the law. And in a fascinating moment in history, we see both sides of this equation invoking the Insurrection Act against the other. Days like this, I love my job. Prosecutors rejected the defense's interpretation of the Insurrection Act as unconstitutional. No government official, including the president, has authority to authorize an attack on the Capitol or the government more generally. Of course they do. Why would they not have that power? He's the president. He is the commander-in-chief. As a matter of fact, this country was built on the Anglo tradition, right? So our entire system of government is set up not just on the English common law, but on the system of government where we have an executive power, and we have a parliament, and we have a judiciary. All that comes from the same place. And in times of crisis, you better believe that a king has dissolved parliament. The executive has dissolved parliament. And the president absolutely can dissolve Congress. I can't wait till Trump goes on trial for this. Please, if you are listening, Trump, I've got to be your lawyer for that one. Because you had the right to dissolve Congress, if you ask me. We'll appeal to natural law. We'll appeal to the English common law. We'll appeal to history. But this is just, I hope, the opening act here. Because, of course, the president has the authority to authorize a militia. Of course, the president has the authority to authorize an attack on traitors or people who are seditious or people who are committing insurrection. Of course he has that power. Unless you don't like him. Unless he's your enemy. Unless you have the upper hand right now. And that's not a legal question, it's a political one. If the jury convicts Rhodes and his co-defendants of seditious conspiracy, attempting to overthrow the government or opposing by force any execution of its laws or authority, they would face up to 20 years in prison. Rhodes, who has a law degree from Yale, is likely to testify in his own defense. So that's the end of the introduction to this article. I'd like to point out here, this crime of the century, they're facing 20 years in prison. All right. I had a case where this kid, not a kid, I mean, he's an adult. Pretty sure he was 26 at the time. He was entrapped into selling prescription pills by a cop. He was set up on this, what we call a substantial assistance deal, where we'll make these charges go away if you set up enough drug dealers for us. Cops knowing full well that you're getting your prescription from a doctor. You don't have like some higher ups that you can turn in or turn on, right? You're getting your prescription from a doctor, you're selling it on the street. That's by and large how that works. And that's how it worked in this case. But they said, you work for us and we'll make these charges go away. And if you don't, by the way, we're going to arrest your pregnant girlfriend for trafficking too. So you really don't have a choice, do you? That guy had a quote-unquote offer of 36 years in prison. When it came down to sentencing, the state magnanimously dropped this offer down to 18 years in prison, if you can believe that. Now, this was not my case at the trial level. I've had a heart attack. Anyway, that was not my case at that time. Long story short, but 18 years for being entrapped by the cops to sell his own prescription medication. These guys, crime of the century, they're looking at 20 years. So, again, look back to that list that these prisoners have made of the jail system in D.C., all the horrible things they've been subjected to. That's every inmate in the country. Look at these guys facing 20 years in prison for doing what they believed was the patriotic thing, the right thing. And I can show you just as many people who have been looking at 36 years because the cops entrapped them. Which is not to make light of these January 6 cases, is not to make light of Stewart Rhodes' case specifically. It's just to put in perspective for you that yes, this is terrible, that this is done for political reason. However, think about the country that you are trying to save, the country that you think you are fighting for. Because all these people you have claimed to detest all these years, all these horrible criminals, all these people the cops were rightly killing or imprisoning, or just outright murdering or ruining their lives or their families. You know, maybe this whole affair will break down some of that wall, or at least cause you to step off of your moral high horse about what you thought you knew about the American legal system. Hopefully next week we will take up the trial of Ezra Pound again, unless something else happens in this Rhodes case. But either way, we should see you next Tuesday. Till then.